Collins, we can start with you, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Collins Muhongo. As properly introduced, I'm the former CEC for infrastructure in Bungoma County. So I have a bit of experience on working with the counties. I also have a lot of experience in working in government because previously I worked for over 10 years in Kenya Revenue Authority as an automation and transformation expert. Currently, I'm a politician and a social transformer. So basically, the subjects that we are going to discuss today are very dear to my heart.
Okay, great. And the gentleman father on my right.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is George Gaira. I'm a businessman and also a political analyst. And I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me this early morning. I know it's all cloudy out there, it's raining, it's drizzling and whatnot, but you've braved the cold and just to show up in here. Probably, Mr. Muhongo, if I could start with you. Most recently, I saw you had in your previous work, you had something doing with about 300 million or so that Bungoma County received in terms of just to put up a proper infrastructure. Probably could start with that a little bit, then we run into what the business of the day is.
Yeah, I've had a bit of experience with the county government, and I think the subject matter of today, whereby we are talking about priorities of expenditure in government. The 2010 devolution constitution gave us an opportunity to devolve services to the counties, and we can say that we've had some mixed experiences, whereby a bit of those services have gone to the counties. However, we've also been able to devolve corruption as well. Yeah, so you realize that we have a long way to go for us to address the socio-economic challenges in the country. So we will be keen to share our insights, both at the national government and county governments as well.
All right. And George, you as a businessman, yes. Yesterday was quite a very interesting day in the streets of Nairobi. Most businesses were closed. What would be your take about that?
It's been quite a terrible time for the last couple of weeks, not just yesterday, but since we started having these demos by the young Gen Zs. Because every time we have which is very unfortunate, every time we have a national debate and there's a fallout between those in government, those in opposition, and the citizens of this country who have an issue with their government, is that the biggest sufferers of the biggest people face the highest impact usually are the businessmen within the central business district.
Absolutely.
And it's not like Kenyans do not have a platform where they can go. People can actually go and camp at Uhuru Park. But it seems like there's always an option. CBD is the best option because of the kind of impact that you're able to get. And unfortunately, those of us who are in business and happen to trade within the central business districts, and not really the central business district, but actually those also working within the vicinity, Ngara and other business areas around there, always suffer the cost. But for those who are in those demos, actually will tell you it's all for the better of our country, which then it means some of us have to pay for it.
Before you pay the price a little bit, and then there will be better days to come. Okay. All right. So that is one of the discussion of the lovers to have the face of yesterday's demos. The entire about 6 months or 6 weeks or so, the demos have had a very different shade of a skin, if I might call it. Yeah. But as of yesterday, we were seeing another peel, another scale, just scales come off the eyes, and we're seeing a different kind of demo where we had roads as early as I think around 10, 11 in the PM, roads being blocked. We had section of the Thika Road being blocked, some sections on Mombasa Road were being blocked, and really I don't know if it was overhyped, the Nane demonstrations, or there was a change of heart. What would be your take, George?
Sometimes they say that any times you want to do, especially in project management, there's also tact. It's important to have a tact in how you want to execute your targets. And I think the Gen Z uprising, in its timing, it was appropriate because of the issues that were being raised. I've said that Gen Zs are almost 29% of this country, and it's a sizable number that for all intents and purposes must be listened to. And even the issues that are being raised by the Gen Z are not necessarily Gen Z issues. The issue of economy and jobs is something that I think all of us Collins are struggling with. And also those ones in the private sector who will tell you that the cost of living, and cost of doing business are extremely tough, high taxes, and you can't really be able to do that. And so there are issues that at the beginning were picked up very, very passionately with everybody, and had a historic moment on the 25th of July, 25th of June, sorry, the day they even stormed Parliament. And I think to many people that was a turning point in as far as the affairs of this country are concerned.
Absolutely.
And I think with that having been successful, all of us who are particularly probably in support of that particular, or the issues that were being raised, we might debate the tact, but the issues are not debatable in as far as we are concerned as Kenyans, in as far as tax and other issues are concerned. But I think leading up to this particular one must have been overhyped because of it gets a bit tiring because then once the message is home and the president appeared to be listening to what they're saying, and he was partially responding to the issues. You know, he immediately went in to admit that we have issues in government, and then mentioned to dissolve his cabinet, which gave a very good, which got a very good response from the Kenyans, not just locally, but I think internationally as well, because it was an indication that the president has shown interest in what is happening.
Absolutely.
And for him having narrowly escaped, you know, in most countries countries that face what we faced on June 25th, largely governments do not survive.
Absolutely.
And so for him, it was a narrow escape, and he got a lifeline to see another day. And I think those who are in agitation ought to have changed tact, because this is exactly what happened. It's funny because there was another show yesterday, and we were just debating this, and we are comparing it to the history of the Mau Maus, who had legitimate issues that were agitating for about land and freedom. And, you know, they went into the bush and went into war.
Yeah.
But, you know, they overstayed in the bush. And then those who were sort of fairly elite and got a chance to be educated and more informed, literally just picked up the issues from what the Bushmen were alleging. And you know, they went to the table and actually formed government.
Yeah.
By the time the Mau Maus woke up, there was a new government.
Yeah.
And you remember President Jomo Kenyatta, first thing he did after he got into government, he declared Mau Mau as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And they became victims of the state.
Absolutely.
So just to answer your question, that it might be, from where I see it was a bit overhyped. It was not as structured. There is no organization that thrives without structures. You might take off on a good note. That's why we have terrible organizations like Al-Shabaab, which is a terrorist organization. But then they have leaders. That's why if Al-Shabaab can have a leader.
On the same note, now that everyone thinks that this particular Gen Z has been leaderless, but we're also having in different quarters, if you may, Collins, people have said this thing is leaderless, but there are some rumors doing rounds, and we're getting to know so and so funded this. For example, Jimmy Wanjigi's house was raided yesterday, subject to, rather it's alleged that he has been on the forefront to be funding some of these things in the recent past, and even when he was just down to his home in Muthaiga, which is equally another ambassadorial whole of a street where ambassadors, most of them live by, and then that is one area that is safely guarded. But you will get him coming all the way from that particular section, coming to town and funding some of these activities, and then from there now we see the only activities that happened in the country yesterday probably was Nairobi. But you look at the western part of the country, further down the coastal region, there was nothing much happening. People were like, this is done. In Kisumu, for example, guys were celebrating, like, hey, the president has done us good. In Bungoma, there was literally nothing. In Central Province, there was totally nothing. In coastal region, there was totally nothing. So you find that the epicenter of it all happens to be Nairobi. And that's why I'm picking up the subject and saying probably are the funders and the leaders of this particular Gen Z, quote unquote, are in Nairobi.
Maybe, you know, the jury is still out. We may not know if anybody is being funded or not, because that is a fairly legal and criminal engagement. So we may not say for sure anybody is funding anything. However, what I may just want to point out is that the demonstrations have been systematic, and they were spontaneous when they started. And I know yesterday they were low-key, but that was basically because of fatigue and also because of the coalescing factor. Because originally the main point was a finance bill, then it mutated later to the structure of government. However, those issues, in my honest opinion, I think the president missed a very great opportunity to make a very clean break and actually address the issues that were being raised. Because basically what has been happening over the last few years, not just in this regime, is that there is a continuous apathy by the citizenry against the government. And this has been going on. It may have manifested itself in demonstrations, in electoral clashes, but basically the citizens are saying that the government is not responsive. And even when you saw the cabinet, when it was being sworn in, the level, and even those during those interrogations, the level of opulence, and even those declarations, you have billionaires in Kenya. And yet in the same country, we are saying the country is really
struggling,
underdeveloped, and there's a huge challenge with the population and especially the youth. So what is happening is that it may appear like there's fatigue, it may appear like now the momentum has gone, but I think we've just kicked the can down the road. This is something that may probably again resurface, probably as more demos, even as we get closer to the elections, or even probably even an insurrection, because unless we address the issues of jobs, unless we address the issues of the high cost of living, the issues of corruption. So these are the issues that probably the president should have made the priority. And one of the perceptions would have been to keep the politicians out of government. Because I think that is one of the things that Kenyans talk very loudly, that they don't want to have politicians in government. And even the 2010 constitution envisaged that. So my honest opinion is that I trust the president to come good in making reforms, but I think he really should have kept politicians out of government. Yeah.
Now, on the same note, since we've come out of the demos, probably we can now just focus on the big question. We've seen people like Joe, who was the greatest of critics to this particular government. But then again, he's the same guy who was bowing down to the same government and saying, you know what, it's time, let's deal this. From our papers today, we can see one of the things that are popping up is the government really, Ruto has just shifted some of these blames that are on him, rather the pressure that is on him. He's decided to give it out to the opposition government. So you look at things like, for example, energy. Opiyo Ndani was one of the best critics, and now he's handling the energy and petroleum docket. And he equally has quite an uphill task. You look at Joho, he's gone to Marine. Many say he has an experience in that. We'll figure out and see how it goes as the day go by. But probably if you could shed some light, what do you expect of this? Do you think it would work any better? I know you've already allayed and said the government, the president wouldn't have put in his fingers into politics and whatnot into the cabinet. But how do you take of this in terms of delivery? Opposition government working closely with the government.
My experience from what I've seen is usually for a country there are three major challenges. They could be political, social, and economic. Politicians handle political problems well, but I think socio-economic problems are properly handled by experts. And why we have a problem with this kind of arrangement of having politicians in government is because this is a tried and tested exercise that we've tried for the last 60 plus years and it has not worked. And so what we need to be looking at is that having politicians to sort out socioeconomic issues is actually not the right thing to do, because you'll find that these very experienced politicians are the same politicians who have been in the country and who have actually midwifed the whole period of corruption, mismanagement, excessive borrowing in government. And these are the challenges. This high cost of living, it's not a self-created problem. It's not created by the citizens, it's actually created by the government. So it was good that we should have tried technical people, because socioeconomic matters are highly technical and they're actually not political. So my own experience would be, my own suggestion would be, we wish the president well and his team, but the challenges that we have as we speak are the same challenges that we are going to have even in huge magnitude in the coming few months, even towards the election. And this is not even just uncommon in Kenya, because some of our peers around the continent have faced the same problem and they didn't address it. I think in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, you see where they are headed through. So Kenya has still a window, and this window is closing fast on the political class. So we just need to ask the president that even if there's a politician, let him push even the technocrats below them to deliver on the economic agenda, which is basically to ensure that we eradicate poverty, we reduce the cost of living, we also deal with the issues of corruption, and also deal with the issues of inequality and nepotism and tribalism.
Tribalism, absolutely. But you see, people like John Mbadi, who are coming to take over the Treasury docket. John Mbadi has quite an uphill task. I know he needs to figure out how he's going to gap up about 350 billion Kenya shillings in this particular financial year. And he's one of the critics who was coming up strongly. I don't know, George. What do you think of Mbadi's take on how he's going to handle this?
When you look at the history of John Mbadi and the path he has taken over the years, first of all, he comes from a finance background where he understands figures.
Yes.
And for many years, because that's why I worked professionally. But then also in terms of politics, that in Parliament, he has been a very big part of the Public Accounts Committee. He has a very good history of what has happened within the Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of, the Committee of Public Accounts Committee largely works on audits. And so he has an idea of exactly what has happened within the State Department of Treasury. And so he is, when you look at his professional background and the history, you can tell that he has capacity to actually pursue that job. But then, of course, he faces a political challenge because the president might have been looking for a political solution, but he's still a businessman and might have enormous interest in what happens in that department. John Mbadi comes in at a very tough time because the Kenyan people are struggling with one big issue, which I think is the elephant in the room, and that is the public debt. The public debt now sits at almost 10 trillion shillings. President Kibaki left in 2013 and lived, the late President Kibaki left in 2013 and left us at around 1.8 trillion, if I'm not wrong. And so in the last 10, maybe 12 years, we've accumulated another 8 trillion shillings. And this is where Jimmy Wanjigi comes in, by the way, as you mentioned him, because he's been a very big whistleblower on the issue of public debt. And at one time even gave a very simple analogy that even for myself, I really thought that he had broken it down for the average Kenyan to be able to pick it up. And he was saying, let's assume that we had 2 trillion shillings in debt before, after President Kibaki left, and that today, 12 years later, we've accumulated about 10 trillion shillings. It means the government that has been there of President Uhuru Kenyatta and President William Ruto now is that it has borrowed at least 8 trillion shillings. So it's not very hard to do that, because you just say in 8 years, how much have we borrowed? We can say, for example, we borrowed $1 trillion every year. So our debt should be 8 trillion up. But also then you look at the expenditure, you say, how much debt have we been paying? So if somebody comes and says we've also been paying $1 trillion shillings every year, then we've paid almost the same amount. So it's just simple mathematics. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Because if you're a finance guy and you're an accountant and I'm asking you to give me an account, and you tell me in the last 10 years we borrowed 8 trillion shillings, and you put in one column, then our debt would be 8 trillion shillings. But then if I go look at our payment accounts, and I also see that we've been paying $1 trillion shillings every year, then we've almost paid almost the same amount. It almost buys into what Okiya Omtata has been saying, that probably we don't have any debt. You understand? And so public debt becomes the elephant in the room, the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury, and it needs a bold and a tough guy to be able to say that. And I think the president was alluding to that yesterday when he said that because he's committed to fighting corruption, he was saying no cabinet minister is stopped from raising any alarm where there is corruption. And that if Mbadi, you hear there's some problem there, make the noise. You know, and I think he also mentioned Opiya Wandayi. He said if there's a problem in the Ministry of Energy, you'll be able to raise that. So the elephant in the room for John Mbadi, because if we can address the issue of public debt and be able to solve it, then at least the government can be able to raise more in terms of development budget, which is where we are struggling. Because you just look at what has been mentioned as a wage bill, almost $1 trillion shillings. Then you have another $1 trillion shillings going almost paying the national debt. So you remain with a very small amount of money that can be spared for development budget. And the only way to be able to solve that is to address the amount of money, to address two things. The cost of running government, which is what the president has been alluding to with the wage bill and cutting costs within departments. And also they proposed, you remember immediately after their pricing, he also mentioned that there's about 47 state departments that he wants them to be shut down. And all that is in an effort to be able to reduce the cost of running government. So you can imagine John Mbadi has two things: to be able to cut down the cost of operation, but also to uncover the issue of public debt. And I think from where I sit in terms of his mental capacity and personality, John Mbadi has the capacity to be able to raise those issues. I just doubt if those who have been there, remember, people do not know this, that the person who was the cabinet secretary for finance all that time was Henry Rotich, was the president's man. The person who was at treasury then as the governor of CBK was the immediate CS, Juguna Ndungu. And the person who was the CS for treasury is actually Kamau Thuge, who's currently the governor of Central Bank. So all these three characters are the president's men. Yeah. So I wonder how John Mbadi is going to be able to uncover the issue of public debt, because the borrowers are seated next to the president. You understand? So he might mean well as a person, John Mbadi, but then what's important is whether or not he'll get the goodwill to actually be able to execute that job.
Maybe just to help George on Mbadi, apart from the issue of public debt, I think when I listen to him, he has knowledge of what he wants, and basically the issue is he needs to find a way of plugging that gap in the debt, in the budget cycle, because I think the 360 billion that the finance bill was seeking to raise has to be plugged. And I think it's even worse because I think we've been taken back to the finance bill 2022, 23. So that bill could even be 500 or 600 billion. When I listened to him, he was very categorical about reforms in KRA. One of the things that there are two sets of truth here which cannot be correct at the same time. One, the tax to GDP ratio for Kenya is sits at around 15%, which is very low for our economy and very low even as compared to our peers like South Africa, like Ethiopia, which are at 25%. So meaning, technically, Kenyans are undertaxed. But still, again, there is another second sort of truth. Majority of the population are saying they're overtaxed. So where is the middle ground? Yes. So the truth actually is that KRA has been targeting the non-taxpayers, the salaried people, the people who are non, the consumer tax, the VAT. But the problem with the Kenya Revenue Authority is that it has not done enough reform to ensure that it actually evades tax. It makes sure that it nabs tax cheats. It then makes sure that all businesses pay their fair share of taxes. And because of this, I heard the minister say that he's going to undertake a very aggressive automation and transformation process in KRA to ensure that any tax cheats are nabbed, and basically you will address the tax base. If you increase the tax base, then you can actually reduce the overall tax liability to all the people. So that is one of the biggest things that he needs to do. And basically these are businesses, the middle and small businesses. These are the businesses that are not actually doing their fair share on the taxes. You will find that there's
it's the majority.
Exactly. And you'll find there's a consumer tax like VAT, whereby every other item that you are purchasing has VAT on it. But this VAT is not eventually remitted to KRA. That's where the challenge is. So apart from the issue of the public debt, I think Mbadi has a lot of work to ensure that he does the necessary reform, because right now it's only KRA that will save this country in terms of raising more money. Because I don't think there's going to be any time where we are going to have any increases on taxes, not even before this election, not even after, because I'm so sure once you touch the taxes, there will always be a disruption, because now people know that this can actually be resisted. So for purposes of the finance ministry, that is true. But also for other departments as well, other ministries, there are critical areas like even health. The social health insurance.
Deborah has just taken over.
Yes, the social health insurance fund is a good idea to take over from NHIF, because I think NHIF, you've seen for the longest time, it has been riddled with corruption, and also just the fact that it hasn't sorted out our health issues. It means there was something wrong with it. So,
but how do we transition straight up from NHIF that we are yet to, for lack of a better word, closure? And now we are going into something else that the public has not been sensitized about.
There is a lot of audit on NHIF, and it has shown that we lose quite a bit of money on NHIF and in terms of the multiple claims. And also when you just look at the infrastructure in the hospitals and even the kind of facilities and services we get there, you will find that obviously it has not been a working system. The only thing that probably I would encourage the CS for Health to do is to sensitize the public better, because I think that's even one of the challenges that the finance bill had. That finance bill, probably 80 or 90% of it is just quite fine, because it has even protectionist issues of protecting the local economy. But the challenge was that there was no proper public participation, which is anchored in law, which is anchored in the Constitution. So I just encourage the CS for Health to ensure that it does a necessary sensitization around social health insurance fund, which in my opinion I've read it thoroughly. I think it's a better idea, it's a better upgrade to the NHIF. Also the other ministry which has a huge challenge is education. Yeah, the issues around
Gamba is coming straight into another strike that is
CBC. The CBC curriculum is having a lot of challenges, and the university education funding. Those are two major areas, and also of course remuneration and shortage of teachers. So these are areas that these gentlemen and ladies need to really ensure that they help the president to achieve. Because if they don't do it, like I said, this window is just very short.
It's a very short window.
And in a very short while, you'll just see this whole insurrection again coming up. Because unless we address these issues, we'll definitely not see the end of this.
But the world is creating every other person who is put up into such a position. They're always having a team of people to advise them. Don't they sit down and just listen to them and, for lack of a better word, what were ground?
That's why I was telling you when we started earlier that socioeconomic issues should actually be handled by experts. They are very extreme issues. In Kenya, you will find that Kenya is the biggest economy in East and Central Africa. But yet in the standard of living, Kenya is not actually high up there. Even in Tanzania, it's better right now. You will find that people spend less on education in Tanzania, spend less on health in Tanzania. The cost of living is lower in Tanzania, probably maybe better than Uganda maybe. But honestly, if you want proper results in the socio-economic factors, let's have technical people, people who are versed with change and transformation, so that these people can actually prescribe proper solutions. Because these solutions are not just going to be discussed in politics, in rallies, in people on top of cars. That cannot be done this time. So my advice would be the technocrats below those CSS should really step up and be counted, so that we actually sort out these issues.
We're moving on pretty well. Dear viewers, if you are watching us from where you are and you'd love to put in a comment or a word out there or rather just to changia this particular discussion, tell us your thoughts about what is happening, the CSS and whatnots, the demos for yesterday, your opinion. We'll be happy to read them to our viewers, and we'll be happy to engage. George, when we came in earlier, you were having a chit chat about how MCAs have gone rogue. Our good friend Mwangaza has been shown the door quite a number of times.
Absolutely.
And finally, they've decided, you know what, it is time. Probably if you can shed some light on your thoughts about it.
It is, first of all, it is a democratic process, and I think within our constitution we anticipated a situation where in both the national government and the county governments, that there are times when leaders might not be at their best, and it is the duty of the county assemblies and really the National Assembly as well, because remember the president is not out of limit from being impeached as well. It's a constitutional process. And so in Meru County, it seems they are very passionate about that role, and they've been able to do it almost a third time in 2 years. And you know, looking at the numbers is that 49 MCAs have voted in support of the motion, and then that 17 MCAs rejecting it, and only 3 absentees, clearly showing that we have a majority of the MCAs still not at par with the governor, or at least, the very least, do not agree with the way the governor governor is running a business. But when you look at the allegations, the kind of allegations that are being laid on Governor Mwangaza, To be very honest, they're just about appointment and positions. He's being accused that a couple of boards, the local boards within the county government, microfinance board, county public service board, he was supposed to appoint some people that he has delayed appointing them, and it seems like there could be, maybe Collins can tell us, because within the county government system there's also local politics and interest as well in terms of divisions. What many people do not know is that Meru County, unlike the many other counties in what you call the Mount Kenya region, it is the most liberal. It is the only county in Mount Kenya region that has even voted ODM MPs. You understand? Because of how the local politics, it's split within 3 regions. We have those ones who call them, those ones that come from an area called Igembe, who are different people. We have those ones that are from the Imenti region, which is a major sub-tribe within the Meru County. And then you have the Tiganias, who are always the leaders of opposition, the likes of Peter Munya. And they've always been voting against the regime, years after years. So when you look at that and understand the local politics in Meru County, then you realize you could understand why Kawira Mwangaza would face all such opposition. Remember, she's an independently elected governor. Yeah. So she went against the king of Imenti, who was Chris, Kiraitu Murungi, who comes from the Imenti region. And then again went against a favorite from the Igembe area, which is Mithika Lituri. You know, he beat 2 titans and billionaires, for that matter, to be able to win that seat independently without any MCAs. So it was always expected that he was going to be, because he's not a member of UDA, yet UDA forms the largest of the MCAs within that county government. So there's a competition of interest, because she largely came in as an independent. And as an independent, so politically you'd expect that he owes nobody any political liability, which is different, because absolutely, because the other people could tell you, you know, it is our party that got you in. Yeah. But you see, nobody in Meru can tell her that, you know, we got you in. It's the people who got her in. Yeah. And so you can understand why she would face such resistance. And I hope that the people of Meru can now take time to look back and decide whether or not the problem is the governor or the county assembly. And then we pursue a lasting solution, because what I know is that every time we have such squabbles, and maybe Collins can probably be better explain to us the issue of budgeting and what it means. It's very easy for county assemblies to sabotage the process of funding of programs within the county government. Yeah. And the sufferers will always be the voters and the people. And so such issues, because every time you have to this means we are now going to take another whole month of just debating about these issues and not addressing a new financial year, because we just the new financial year just started in July 1st. So it's just a new beginning of a new financial year. This is the time when the county departments are supposed to be on top of their plans in order to be able to run their programs for this financial year. And you can see now they are forced to focus on politics again. So it's terrible that we have to be here now, and I think they could be having legitimate issues. Because it is them who understands better what is happening in those counties. But you know, the process of impeachment is not a ghost process. It is legal, and you are supposed to actually allay the actual reasons why you're impeaching the governor. And I've just read through the issues that are being alleged here. Largely, I've told you, it's just about appointments. There's nothing that you can call.
Which brings me to the topic. You see some of these people being like the entire revenue board was sent home, and that means again, Mr. Muhongo, you can agree with me that when you dismiss such a pool, that means you're dented, because you need now to put up against a case against the labor and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I can just try to put it in perspective, the challenges that the county governments are having right now are the issues of the powers of the governor vis-a-vis the powers of the county assembly, and the whole issue of oversight. I think this is an area that probably after 12 or 13 years after the new constitution is an area that we need to relook at. It is one thing to think that the governors, the MCAs are rogue in oversighting the governors, like they are doing in Meru. But also, the flip side is that for the 45 or so counties where we have no noise, is because the two are on the same table, they're sleeping on the same bed. So what normally happens is that the governor comes up with a budget that is friendly to the MCAs. The MCAs have their own budgets for the ward development funds. So what these guys will do is that they will make sure that they have their own contractors for these ward development funds. And what that makes it bad for the common person is that priorities are not followed. And also there is no oversight for those projects. So you'll find that there's a lot of peace in so many counties, not because there is work being done there, but it's because the executive and the county assembly, they are sleeping on the same bed.
Yeah.
So to me, even what is happening in Meru is even better than the silence in the other 45 counties. Because in Meru, they appear as like there are two centers of power and they are always in competition. The only thing that I would fault is the process, because it takes so long to go through the impeachment process, and so doing it every other time, I think there should be a threshold of probably maybe doing it once, maybe after another year, maybe another period. But if it is so repetitive, then it now disrupts business. But actually the oversight being done in Meru, I think, is the right thing. Yeah, because also the problem, I think, with the Governor Kawira is she kind of comes out like she has a demeanor that is very condescending. And when you're working like that, government is a collective area whereby you cannot just load over so many people. Yeah, so personally, I would push that the legislation governing county government should actually be relooked into to look at the areas on oversight, because currently the 45 or so counties where you hear no stories about impeachments and anything else, you go to the Senate and you see a lot of reports there of misappropriation by the county governments, misappropriation by the county assemblies, but none of them is raised as a substantive issue of discussion at any other point.
At the county level now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had this particular CS, Miss Langat, Stella Sui Langat. She's one of those who didn't. She's the only one actually who was not approved to the cabinet secretary, as a cabinet secretary. Yeah. And many people have allayed fears that probably the people who are closer, who have the president's ear, literally, put up forces to see that she is not given this particular locket by all means, rather to try and change and see if someone else can fit for this. What will be your take over this?
Stella Soy, in many ways, was the least candidate with was the candidate with the least political capital going into that nomination process. She was the poorest, aside from the young man from Meru, the 32-year-old CS now CS for water. Yeah, and so she appears to have not understood the politics that go into getting these public appointments. You don't just wake up and become a CS. There's a lot that comes at play. And I think the president wasn't stupid even by the time he was nominating him. Nominating her, because she already knew her. That's why to get to that level where you're being part of a 22 cabinet in a country of 52 million, you really must have excessive political capital to be able to get there. And she seems to have that, but I think when you look at how she performed on that particular day, sometimes when you attend interviews, my brother, for somebody like me who has done media and advertising for the last 20 years, since 2005, when we went into a media agency, this is we're almost 4 months to 2025. I'd been doing 20 years. I can tell you the business of public presentation might not be everybody's talent. It's not everyone. You might have a very skilled person that knows his work, but might not be be able to really do a stellar presentation. So when you look at how she performed, she might have not have done well. She didn't appear quite confident in what she was saying. Even the subject matter, when you listen to members of parliament, I was listening to some of them, including female members of parliament, yesterday in the reaction after the rejection. They were saying that even though they would have loved her to be confirmed in the spirit of gender balance and visibility within the cabinet, but indeed the lady did not appear to understand the subject matter, or on that particular day at the very least was not able to express herself well. So according to her performances, she didn't do well based on how she appeared and her presentation. But you see, we've had terrible nominees than her before who still made it into cabinet. And so it's very possible that she could, if she had a good political capital, would have very easily have survived that and remained in cabinet. Or better still, the president realized maybe there's somebody else he needs to sort, and they just decided to sacrifice her. Because at the point when the head of state is coming with the names of of his cabinet nominees. There's a process that is discussed with the hundreds of people at State House, and the advisors and the political advisors. They don't just wake up and give a name. And every time a name is put on the table, they review it, and they even have NSIS going back to check their background. It's something that they do widely. They investigate you widely. So the president was not in any way stupid to get her there. I think she might just be a victim of not having enough political capital to be able to survive this. Because the president, remember, had nominated Rebecca Miano to become AG. And then midway, he rescinded that decision and put there somebody else. And now Rebecca Miano, she's now the CS for tourism. So it's also possible that maybe the president realized that. Remember, he had appointed 21 nominees, so minus this cabinet, that means we still have 2 cabinet slots for him to appoint of that. So Stella Soy then becomes a victim of that, but we must also admit that on face value, her presentation was not was not off a little bit. And I do not want to believe it's because she wasn't qualified, but I think she just didn't have a good day on that particular day.
What is your take, Mr. Mohammed?
For me, I look at it differently. For me, I think it was an exercise in optics for Parliament. They need to appear like they are doing some bit of
something.
Yes. So politicians are very clever sometimes in the way they prosecute their trade. And like I told you, of the 3 areas that we deal with in this country, I think politics is where we are most advanced. So these gentlemen and ladies in Parliament, I think, were under obligation to appear like they can actually not just rubber stamp what the executive says, because this is one of the accusations that has been labeled to Parliament most of the time. So they had to probably reject 1 or 2 people to show that they actually don't, they just rubber stamp whoever comes from the executive. So for me, I wouldn't say that the lady was not qualified, or even the presentation was. I think we've seen worse. We've seen people with absolutely no track record. We have absolutely no. They are very tainted past. People with corruption cases hanging around them, and still they have made it through the Parliament vetting process. So for me, as a politician now, I think that is basically for optics, to just ensure that Parliament is also playing this role.
So that they just keep the wheel going.
Yes.
We'll go into the politics of parties. I would want to zoom in my focus on ODM. ODM has Ali Hassan Joho and our brother Wycliffe Ambetsa Oparanya, who are the deputies of ODM. Now they are no longer deputies. So probably today, if there was a discussion about them having being replaced. And that means there is heated debate and lobbying in between the party who should be a political, who should be a deputy, who should not be a deputy, who should be a political affairs secretary, and things like those. Names like Gladys Wanga have come up strongly. People have suggested that she comes on the forefront in terms of representing ODM as a party, as probably as a deputy or a political affairs secretary. What would be your take, Collins?
Yeah.
Politically?
I think politically for ODM, in the short term, they have reaped big for getting those appointments, especially Treasury and Energy. However, as a party, I think in the long term, I think on this one, the ODM party, ODM party has survived for the longest time, alongside among other parties. It is the one that has survived since the advent of multi-party democracy. But I have a feeling that with this kind of stand that they've taken of late, coming on the backdrop of very deadly demonstrations, I think they have planted the seed for their exit in 2027. It's very unlikely that you will see a dominant ODM again, because I think even the parties, even the arrangements that they always come up with, whether it is Azimio, whether it is, I don't know which other coalitions were there in 2013 and 2007, it is very difficult to take advantage of an insurrection by a totally different group of aggrieved people, and then you come up and do an elite bargain of politicians. This, I can assure you, is something that is going to come up again, and we'll come here and demonstrate that we talked about this so many 2 or 3 years ago, and we've seen exactly what has happened. I have a very serious feeling that we may not see demonstrations, we may not see very loud protestations, but if you go to the, you know, right now we are using 20th century tactics to deal with 21st century challenges. You know, these young people, they are poor, they don't have jobs, they don't have, but they are very educated. They have better sources of information more than the elderly people. They have better energy levels in terms of articulation, and now they have better communication platforms. Yeah, I was just looking the other day on some of these X-Spaces, and you get an X-Space that has 800,000 listeners, 500,000 listeners. There's no single rally in Kenya that can even give 50,000 listeners. True. And even when you have a rally of the president of 10,000 listeners, usually it's a monologue because it's the president talking towards the people. But this one is that it is an articulation of very many speakers of different perspectives, and I can tell you for sure, the government and politicians in general, it's not just President Ruto, all politicians in general, they are really under pressure. They may survive 2027, but not beyond that, if they don't actually shape up.
You know, ODM, since the first time it competed in 2007 elections, has largely branded itself as a, which is my party just for the record, has largely branded itself as a pro-people party, and has survived all those years, Collins, largely by siding with the people. And therefore, Raila Odinga and ODM's biggest political capital has been the masses. And that's why the last time he was elected actively, was an elected politician, was 2013. How he has been able to be relevant for the last 10 years, and maybe 12, if you add now the 2 years, is largely because of the people. And this has come over a backdrop of an uprising by the people. And what it appears is that they've sort of sabotaged an active uprising, and have been beneficiaries of a deadly, process that has resulted to dozens of people being gunned down brutally. Remember the young man that they blew up his brains right in front of Parliament.
We're having about 60 unclaimed bodies.
Absolutely, at City Mortuary, and you can imagine the pain and the anger of that. And then for it to only result into ODM getting cabinet positions, I think the timing is very wrong, and they've been unable to read the mood. And I think what Collins even alluded before is that this was a social issue being addressed, but the president had given it a political solution, because the Gen Z and whoever else that was protesting were raising issues to do with taxes, cost of living. These are social issues. And then the president's biggest response is that I'm going to bring ODM in government. I think he has missed the boat. And so, unlike what was happening back in the days when electors were not, most of the voters were not informed, the biggest danger going forward, my brothers, is that going forward into the 2027 election, that is different from what happened in 1987 or 88 when you had Mlolongo, is that we have a huge vote base that is informed. And Collins is right that Kasarani Stadium feels about 60,000 people. And so for you to have 300,000 people listening at one time is like you're doing a rally in 5 stadiums full at one time with only 100 shillings or maybe 2 GB of data. Is a game changer in how politics is being done. Even what people used to struggle with in terms of mobilization of agents. Remember the debates that you've had during presidential elections, and they would say that the challenge that the opposition had was its ability to be able to mobilize, to coordinate its agents. Surely you need 290 returning officers to give you the presidential results. If 300,000 people can assemble on a platform, surely 290 you will be able to get, it's a no-brainer, I'll be able to get all my 290 results. You know, in Kakamega County, where we have a brand new vision for the county, me as a person, and coming into these 2027 elections, I have 60 wards. I just kept telling my team that this time round, I'm going to at the very least get my 60 results for the governorship of Kakamega County, because even if it's a win or loss, I can assure you nobody will be able to steal it, because the times have changed and the model with which people are working with. For you to mobilize 60,000 people to come to a stadium, my brother, because I've done politics here in Nairobi as well, whenever you see those Uhuru Park rallies, usually you have a mobilization that comes from the 85 wards, and then they would hire, say, around 10 to 20 buses to ferry in people into Uhuru Park. And a bus could probably get you 50 people. So 10 buses, you're talking of 500 to 1,000. So that then you can be able to get 50,000 people at Uhuru Park. You can imagine what it means to fuel them, first to hire them and then fuel them. And then paying them allowances. You need almost tens and tens of millions just to be able to assemble 50,000. And now a young man can sit in his, maybe even a hostel in college, on campus, and just use 50 shillings to buy data, and he goes live on TikTok with 100,000 people. Yeah. I think most politicians will be shocked at what is coming up in the next election.
I think the pie has been moved, so to speak. Yeah. The pie has been moved politically, financially, literally things are moving.
You know, where, and this is what I'm saying, the biggest danger to any politician going forward is the informed voters. Yeah. Today I have a cousin who is in the village somewhere there in Bungoma. I come from an area called Webuye, in Lugulu area there, who is in the village who never used to leave the market. His business is around home, the farm, and then the local market. Nowadays he's on TikTok. And he's able to tell me what is happening at State House. You understand? Absolutely. That level of information wasn't there before. Yeah. And that's why when you look at how even rogue governments have survived even in Africa and maybe even across the world, is that they usually are very popular in the rural areas and not in the cities. And the difference usually is the exposure and information, because those people in the city are more informed of what is happening as opposed to those ones who are in the village. And that is why even in countries like in the US, there's where you see the Republican Party is largely conservative, is popular in the rural areas. Same to the Labour Party in the UK. That's why the mayor of London is a Labour mayor. You understand? Yeah. He's an opposition mayor. And so the danger is that now that we have access to information and some guy in Turkana South, somewhere there in Lokicha in the bush, is able to know what's happening here in town. Absolutely. It means Lomenen, who was the long-time member of parliament for that area, who is now the senator of Turkana, can no longer just bring dry information. By the time he gets back to Turkana, he finds people that are already informed. So the 2027 election is going to be a game changer. And I think, and I agree with Collins, that most politicians would be shocked because they are expecting the old school type of voter that you can just largely mobilize around maybe ethnicity and hype, and then find a very informed voter that now knows what role a leader is supposed to play. In Bungoma, they had an issue in 2013 where the biggest titans, political titans in the county, all ran for one seat. It always shocks me, Collins, how Kombo and Kisa Kitui and Governor Lusaka were able, and Senator Wetangula as well, they all ran for the same seat and left the governorship a very critical seat.
But it's because maybe at that time no one really knew.
It's information. It alludes to what I am saying, Collins. That you see, the people were not informed. Now people can look at somebody and say, in Kakamega, that's why we didn't vote for Governor Halwale. You know, because people will tell you, Halwale is a good senator because he's an agitator, he has skills to debate, he fits well in this particular role. And then Governor Oparanya is largely an administrator, he can sit and plan programs. So they would tell you, I'd rather vote for Halwale as a senator and not as governor, because he has ability and has information now on who fits where. And so going into that election, my brother, people are going to be very shocked at what is going to happen. And we don't even need to get to 2027. We now have IBC, as soon as IBC is formed, maybe in the next 6 months, we have some by-elections. We have some, I think now that Wandai has also exited parliament. Then we are talking about at least 3 or 4 constituencies and about 8 MCAs. This is going to be a test point of how the voters are going to think, especially coming into off what has happened in the last few months. This is a point where we want to see that Gen Z that can mobilize 100,000 people. Surely, you know, 100,000 people can elect a governor, not even an MP. 100,000 people, if I can, on my platform, I can hold 100 people on a daily basis for 7 days, Collins. There will should be an impact in terms of what happens in that constituency. And I think these by-elections are going to show this government and any other politician who has not read the mood of what is coming up, that the vote base has changed and the type of voter they're dealing with might not necessarily be the voter that they were facing in the 80s.
So we just coming to the last bit of the clock. It has been a very engaging discussion just to get to know what is happening in our political and leadership spheres. Collins, probably if you can, maybe Georgia can just go with you. In a quick rounder, what would be your parting shot for this 9th day of August?
I've always said for many years and on many shows that no Kenyan made a mistake by going to the ballot to to choose a leader of his own choice, because that's what democracy is all about.
Yeah.
But once a government is elected, whether it's a national government or a county government, we have a duty then as citizens to be able to oversight such governments, because there is no government or county government in Kenya that is actually an NGO. It's funded by taxpayers' money, and there's duty of the taxpayers to be able to audit and oversight any government. And so I want my place to the Kenyan people, now that we are having opposition that is in government, the only true opposition that this government can face must be the people and the taxpayers, because ultimately we're the ones who fund these governments. And so my pleas for the people of Kenya to be able to be keen and watch this government and be able to hold our leaders into account, and still understand that we have legal measures of how to hold these people into account, including the president. Remember, the president, just like Governor Mwangaza, is not off limit. You see, a democratic process is not supposed to end with a win, but you can take through the president through an impeachment process, because it's a legal process. Yeah. And so it's just one of the many measures of holding leaders into account. So my pleas to the Kenyan voters, and particularly the taxpayers, to be able to oversight this government, because the opposition so far has kind of failed us.
Okay.
Mr. Muhongo, your wisdom. As
yeah, for me, I just wish to prevail on President Ruto to really come through with his pledges to tackle the socio-economic challenges that the young people and vulnerable people are facing. Because the challenges that we have currently of eradication of poverty, unemployment, lack of proper sanitation, water, they are largely the same ones that we had 60 years ago. So let's support the president in delivering on this mandate. But as for the people, I think the die is cast for them. Right now, the opposition is working together with the government. And for the largest time, I think we thought that the executive also works with parliament. So the only way that oversight can now happen is through the people oversight schemes. So I just hope that the people don't relent. Let's not get into vices, like maybe we have demos that are financed, or maybe acts of aggression, of criminality, but legitimate methods of getting the governments to actually be oversighted and to deliver on their mandate.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me this particular morning. It's been pleasure. It's been pleasure talking to you, getting just your minds. What do you think about what is happening in our political sphere, our leadership? We've talked about chaos in Nairobi. That's why there yesterday, how we didn't see anything going on in other parts of the country. We've spoken about Mwangaza's fate that lies with the Senate after impeachment. And now we've also touched base on what is going to be happening in ODM, probably by end of business today. Hopefully we're going to be seeing replacements at ODM for the two deputy party leaders, which Mr. Muhongo has said. This particular one, probably ODM has shot itself in the foot, and probably this marks the exit of ODM in the political sphere. We are yet to get to know about that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. My name has been Gaston, and it will be Gaston Wabomba. Till next time, enjoy you. Bye.